I'm so sorry that I didn't realize it was on Skype. So apologies
No,
for
it's
being late.
cool. No, it's fine.
Cool.
No, you're cool. You're okay. You're cool. So I do want to apologize because my room or my studio is currently being repainted, redesigned, so it looks like crap over here.
Oh my God.
We are somewhat professional, so I didn't want to be like, wow, what are they doing? No, we're having it repainted. I'm getting new mics in and new everything, so everything put in.
No, no, it's no problem at all. I'm excited for I'm excited that you get to do that. Like COVID's a weird time, but I'm like, it also provides a lot of space to do shit like that. So,
Absolutely. And it's like I'm going insane in my mind. I'm like, well, I'm just gonna redesign a studio. Screw it, I'm gonna do it by myself. Gonna redo it. Gonna buy brand new equipment. And so it was, but it's So how has Corona been treating you? Quarantine?
not too bad. Like my husband said, like most of my friends, I'm like most of my best friends live in different cities, so I'm like I've been zooming with them forever. And we
Right, right.
like you can still go outside and stuff. So like we'll go outside. We just I don't know. It's for me what's been really interesting is my background's in public health. So just to watch the massive amount of people just not do this is like somewhat hurting like my soul. But I mean the first few months were tough, but then I think most people just realized like this is our new normal and shit got back to business. So yeah, not
No,
too
you can say whatever you want. It's cool. You can
okay.
say whatever you want.
Okay. Yeah, so
uh,
it's not been too bad. And where are
yeah,
you still?
I am in Mississippi.
Okay.
Yeah. Where are you at actually?
Indiana.
Indiana. Cool. All right, great. Been there multiple times. What part of Indiana?
Indianapolis.
Okay. All
Where
right.
did you go? I have not been to
I
Mississippi multiple times.
I have been there. Indiana. Let's see. I think it was. I absolutely have no clue where it was at. It was in between Indianapolis and that other bigger known city. That makes
Fort
sense.
Wayne or Bloomington.
I think I don't know.
It's not that memorable.
That's
I'm
a,
not offended.
I don't know. I don't know. It was the reason it was a weird name. That's why I'm thinking it was because we went from Indiana and then we went over to Missouri and we
Mm.
went to the town where Sheryl Crow is from in Missouri. That's the only way I know because there was a sign up. Um, is there a Morristown, Indiana?
Yep, there is.
That's what that must be where I was at then. Morristown.
Okay.
That name was popping out. I think that's where I was at.
Yeah, yeah. It's not memorable. Morristown is not memorable. So,
Mississippi isn't either, so don't be don't be sad.
awesome. Well, what are we talking about today, man?
So I've got do a little introduction here. Got Erica Ballard on. She is. Let me get my notes. She is the founder of Erica Ballard Health, which is a wellness company that optimizes individuals' energy through food. So I wanted to get you on because you are the first health specialist that has ever appeared on the show. And I had someone come on that lost like 130 pounds in like a year. And he was on telling his story. And I recently had started a weight loss journey. I've lost 20 pounds. I've started doing yoga. And I just wanted to get someone on that would represent the brand well and would also give insight to myself along with the listeners and the fans of the show.
Cool. Congratulations on the 20
So,
pounds.
well, I appreciate that. It's a I'm not necessarily large, but you get what I'm saying. I was in a place where I wasn't happy, so I was like, okay, let's get the script and change it. Got to get a new writer for it.
Totally. I'm off. Yeah, I get that.
So with my research here, I realize that you have an MS and a CHC.
Hmm.
What the fuck is that?
So, I have a master's of science from Tufts School of
Okay.
Medicine, Tufts School of Medicine, in health communication and behavior change. And a CHC is a certified health coach. So now in the world of online, anyone can be a health coach, but I actually went
Oh,
through, like a 40-week intensive program so that I know have so that you're embedded and immersed in this type of stuff.
so what weaned you to go into the health realm? Have you always been like a health nut? Like,
I
and I mean health nut in the most respectful way. I don't mean it as being a jerk. You're a health nut. It's all you do. You're a vegan. I don't mean it in
Yeah.
that way. I mean it as you've always been conscious of health. I know that probably came off kind of dickish, but
No, it didn't. I know what you meant, and I would say I was always obsessed with health, but I don't know if I was always a health nut. So for me, like most of my life, right, like I hated the way I looked and felt, and I was really
okay,
confused as to why that was the case. And when I because I'd worked in public health and healthcare at that time, so I knew the rules. I knew, I quote unquote, knew what to do, and so I would drink the shakes, I would eat the bars, I would do that different stuff, and like I just would wake up and I didn't have the body that I wanted, the bodies you see on TV and magazines. And when I get really honest with myself, right, the other piece of it is I ex- I expected health to unlock happiness within me because I wasn't as happy. Like part of the reason I didn't like the way I looked or felt was because I wasn't happy in general, and so um, I really had to. I thought health would be the linchpin, and so I went on a journey, really to get happy, but through health. And so when I went on that journey, what
mm,
I realized is that like anyone who's ever tried to lose weight, right? You do it you try to restrict, you try to outrun burgers, you try to do these different things, and that's actually not how you get healthy. And I figured that out after like throwing aside all of the things that I've learned in public health and healthcare and really diving into like what does it mean to feel good in your body? What does it mean to sustainably lose weight? Because most people fail at it. What does that look like? And for me, the big takeaway is, but it's actually not pills and quick diets. It's real food, stress management, and a few other things that come with it. When I realized that, you know, I started to get the results I wanted. And the thing that I think was so interesting is that people would tell me what I was doing was wrong, even though it felt really good. And so I had to get over that like initial hump of trusting myself instead of trusting other people. And so when I finally like dug in my heels and it was like, fuck it, like I'm gonna do me, and if it feels good, I'm gonna roll with it. And that's how I became a health nut, because in 6 months my pants fit. In a year I was calm, and I really wanted to start to share like, hey, everything that we've kind of been taught has been wrong. And if you really want to be among like the 7% of people who really sustainably keep that weight off, you got to think differently and you got to do things differently and you got to break from the pack. And that's when I became like this like evangelical about health.
so you say we learned wrong. What does that mean? Like, what did we learn wrong, and what's the right way?
So we've been really taught that health and weight loss is a calorie in, calorie out game, right? So like you eat
Right.
1,500 calories, and then you expand 2,000. That's a net of 500, and you will lose that weight that way. And I always say if that was the case, like we would all be a size 2, right? Like because we all know how to do that and we can do that for a short amount of time. But your body is so complex, like it is so multifaceted. So while calories might be an issue down the road, in the beginning, you actually need to get to your space where your body, one, feels safe enough to lose weight because fat is actually a survival mechanism. And then two, it's got to be in a place where you're not in starvation mode. Starvation mode is why everyone putters out on their weight loss journey. You try to eat, 1,000 calories, and then you end up gaining weight 4 weeks later, and you're like, what the hell? Or like you stall out. It's because really what you want to be focusing on is fat burn and helping your body become metabolically flexible, which is essentially the state where you can burn your fat or sugar as fuel. And once you get to that place, that's when you can play around with calories. But up until that point where you can appropriately burn fat until you can be metabolically flexible, the calorie game is, I mean, it's kind of useless.
So how does one go about learning to burn the fat and burn it correctly? Like,
Sure.
what are the proper steps to do that?
Sure. So I would say that there's one really big step I think everyone can take. There's two things you really want to focus on. So the first is eating real food. So most of us, like, because it's a calorie in, calorie out game, we tend to like, I don't know about you, but like I used to eat like SnackWells and like that might be dating myself, but like 100-calorie packs, and I would be paying attention to that type of stuff. But you're eating processed carbs a lot of the time when you're trying to eat that low of calories, and processed carbs are sugar in the body. So what you really want to do is focus on real food. Forget counting numbers, forget your macros, um, it, and focus in on eating things that were grown in the ground or things that have a mother, right? So high quality animal products, high quality vegetables, high quality fat, things of that nature. And that's where you want to put most of your effort. And I would say to people who are listening is like, if you want to get to 85% of the time you're eating that way. So 50% of the time you're going to like drink wine and eat birthday cake and have a donut and like do that shit. And that's perfectly okay. But you want to get to 85% of the time where you're eating real food. And if you're at 30, don't freak out. Go to 35. Go to 40. Then go to 45, right? Like gradually step it up. So that's what you want to do. And the other piece of it I always like to add is making sure that you manage your stress. So a lot of us, it's COVID, right? So a lot of us are really stressed
Right.
out. But if we're honest with one another, most of us were really fucking stressed out before COVID. And so really getting to a place where like you're calm enough to lose weight because like I said, or burn fat is a survival mechanism. So we can eat really well, but if you're stalling out even when you're eating really well, you want to look at your stress because your stress is the other mechanism why your body can't drop the weight that you want to. Because if you're on, let's say, a level 7 or 8 on a 10-point scale of how stressed out you are, your body's in fight or flight mode being like, we have to fight a bear. Like, we can't be bothered with all the other things, right, of like digestion and fat burning and any of that because your body feels like it's got to just survive at that point. Is that making sense?
No, it makes perfect sense because
Okay.
I kind of use the like you say, you want to get 85% there, but if you're 30, you need to just bump it up to 35 a little bit. I kind of live with that mindset of, okay, if you're going to, because my whole life, my family has just been like, okay, we're going to kick out all the sugar, we're going to do everything, stop it, and start eating healthy. And then about a week and a half later, you're done. So I've learned that you can first take the week, cut out the soft drinks. Then once that kind of thing happens the next week or the next 2 weeks when you feel comfortable, knock out the other one until you're strictly on water and eating healthier. So just because it's, but one of my questions is, what about repetitive eating? Like, let's say, okay, every day at lunch I'm going to have however much, like 3-4 cups of broccoli or whatever, and then a couple pieces of chicken. Like, would that repetitive work? Because I've heard that it does work, but I've also heard that if you're repetitive, your body will get used to that immune going in and will no longer release the weight. You will no longer lose it just because your body's gotten so used to it.
Yeah, that's a good question. So first, I'm like, broccoli and chicken sounds terrible. So I would say first, if you don't like eating it, abort mission. Like, because that actually matters a lot, right? If healthy eating doesn't feel good, if it's a chore, it's
Yeah.
never going to work, ever.
And I've always lived, if it's not good, I'm not eating it. So it has to. I actually prefer the broccoli and chicken my way, honestly, because I just put a little bit of like the dairy-free cheese on it, just to give it some taste. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, continue.
No, I think that's good. So I'm with you. Like people are like, healthy food's so gross. I'm like, I don't look at my food as being healthy. I like look at my food as being good. Like I love what I eat. I literally love the food that I eat. And so, so first and foremost, I just had to get that out there. I'm like, if that sounds terrible, don't do it. Because
Yeah.
if the goal is to feel good and you hate what you're eating, you're moving in the exact opposite direction. Now, to answer like the more specific question of like, is that good or bad for you? What I would say is that your body can go in seasons, right? Like you could eat chicken and broccoli for maybe like 3-4 months straight, and it probably wouldn't be the biggest issue that you have. That's why we have seasonal food because your body can handle these like cyclical time periods. But your body does best with variety because when you have variety, it puts a bit of a like puts a little bit of stress on your body because your body likes a little bit of stress. It doesn't like chronic stress. A little bit of stress, so it has to think differently and be different, right? So it has to like figure out how to digest this other food. It has to turn on different things in its body in order to get things kicking and moving. So I think that it's really, and not only that, but you have this thing called your gut microbiome. And I know I'm going all over the place, but like I think it's all really important. And we've probably all heard these words like all over the internet. But you have your gut microbiome, which is essentially like this control center for the rest of your body. 80% of the nerves go up to the brain, and so your gut microbiome, it loves variety, it needs variety, it craves variety, and so it's run by these gut bacteria. And in order to grow the amount of good bacteria, because there's good and bad bacteria in there, in order to grow the good bacteria, you actually have to have a variety of food, because different things are grown by different foods that you put in. It's just like a seed in the in the ground. Like if you just put in a broccoli and a chicken seed, you're just going to get a broccoli and chicken. But if you want to have tomatoes and rutabaga and squash, like you've got to put these different things right in the ground for it to grow. And the same thing in your gut. So I look at this as my lens is always through an evolutionary lens of like what was best for us back then, because we have made some evolutionary changes, but like not as many as we would think, right?
Right.
And so we needed that push pull, we needed that variety, we needed, like, we have seasons, we have these time frames because our body works best with change. That's why it's literally the only constant in your life, whether it's business, food, or relationships or otherwise. So change is good. It doesn't mean you have to change every single day, but it's like if you're eating chicken and broccoli, I would say for like 3 months, right, you're going to want to shift that up to maybe squash and tofu, or squash and grass-fed beef the next 4 months, 3 or 4 months, and then so on and so forth.
So basically, just every few months or every season, just change up your diet a little bit. Change the meat, change the vegetable.
Yeah, I mean, you did it much more concise than I did, but yes, that's what you want to do. You want to, you just got to remember your body loves variety, because variety provides that acute stress that your body needs in order to think differently.
Now, give me the rundown on like starchy vegetables. Like, what would be something that you're like, oh, I'm really eating healthy, but you're really not, just because you think it's growing in the ground? Or like potatoes and corn, for example. I've always been told those are very starchy, but then like doing like DDP yoga, you're like, well, you need to eat, you can have one potato, you can have so many cups of corn, and I'm like, but I've always been told it's very starchy, you shouldn't have it.
So it all depends on what your goals are. So
Okay.
Potatoes aren't bad for you. They're not like the best thing in the world for you, but they're not bad for you, and neither is corn, and neither are whole grains. They're not terrible foods for you. If you're at the weight you want, if you don't have insulin resistance, if you're not pre-diabetic or diabetic, those foods are fine. But most of us, we want to drop weight, right? Most people in America's goal is to drop weight, and those foods aren't great for you if that is your goal, because when it comes to weight loss, a big key of weight loss is our insulin. And so our insulin is dictated by the amount of sugar we put in our body, and things like potato and corn and more starchy vegetables turn into sugar quicker into our body. So when you're initially on your weight loss journey, pulling those from your diet for about 4 weeks or so is going to be really helpful for the shift that you want to see to happen. But on everyone's weight loss journey, you stall out, and it's once you stall out, that's when you start to add back in those tubers and carbs, because when your body changes, what it needs changes, right? Like that shift is real. Like it makes sense when I say it, but we don't think about it that way. So those things, if like, let's say your goal was to lose 50 pounds, right? And you stall out at 40, then you're probably going to want to start to play around with carbs, because you've made so many changes, and you want to play around with those tubers and those vegetables. So I think it's hard to, like, there's certain foods that are bad for you, right? Like sugar-laden foods, processed carbs, stuff like that. But vegetables and whole grains, they're not bad. They just might not be your best friend in the season that you're in. But once your body shifts, what you eat shifts.
Now, I got a couple of theories that I've searched, and I just want to bring them past you to find out if these are true or absolutely false. So, is gluten just a new trend, like eating gluten free? Is it a trend now that you're just like, oh, that's the cool thing to do is eat gluten free? Or is there truth in eating gluten free?
I love this question, bro. So the answer always is it depends. Like that's the best and
Okay.
worst thing about health. So it is a trend right now. It's like super hot, right? Like it's like everything's
Yeah.
gluten free.
Yep.
We know that it sells in marketing, but most of the shit that's labeled gluten free is probably not good for you, right? Like because like broccoli's gluten free, but it doesn't need a label. It's like we don't put that sticker on broccoli. But the thing about gluten that is really important is a lot of people have gluten intolerances, and people who have celiacs definitely shouldn't eat it. So the way that gluten works is, well, in your body, there's like 4 common triggers. So dairy, soy, eggs, and gluten. Gluten and dairy tend to be some of the biggest triggers in the United States and actually worldwide today. So if you eat that food and it triggers you and you keep putting in your system, it's really bad because what it does is it destroys that microbiome in the gut that we talked about, which can lead to more issues. And gluten's also really bad if you have an autoimmune disorder. So gluten tends to be a protein that aggravates autoimmunity. So like but some people are fine with it. Like my one-on-one clients, like I have a woman who's like never triggered by gluten. I myself am completely gluten intolerant and I can't eat it. And if I eat it, you know, I can't use the restroom appropriately. Like my skin breaks out. I don't feel well. I shut down. Like all of these things happen because it's destroying my gut. So it's really trendy because a lot of people have gluten intolerances and don't know it because there's so much debate of like, is it true or not? And I just hope that your listeners understand that if it doesn't feel good when you eat it, who fucking cares what everyone else says? Like, who cares if they tell you that it's not real or not? Like, if your family, because it's usually family, right? That's not true. Like your uncle or aunt. If you don't
Yeah.
feel like if you don't feel good eating it, then you shouldn't eat it. Because the only reason any of us want to lose weight and get healthy is to feel better. And so to do that, you've got to eat things or like eat things that make you feel better and pull out things that that don't make you feel better.
Well, I look at it this way, like, okay, you have 2 cookies here and you have a yogurt. You could eat the 2 cookies and feel good for 10 minutes, or you could eat the yogurt and then 10 minutes later feel fantastic. Otherwise, the cookies, you would feel terrible in 20.
I agree. The one caveat I would say is that if you really, really, really want that cookie, you better eat it or else
Right.
you're going to eat the whole house. Right? Like,
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
but to your
Yeah.
point, there are things that are better than it's short-term gain versus long-term gain. And the short term's not even, or the long term's not even that long. To your point, it's like, it's a 5-second high for hours of feeling bad, or it's
Right.
a 10-minute hold for hours of feeling good. Like, it's really not that much time.
Right. I got a few more of these urban legends and then we'll move on. Dairy. Is it really as bad for you as people bring it out to be? Like, they're eating dairy free. You're not supposed to have, like they're going from almond milk from regular 2% or whole milk. What's the difference there between obviously the health side there, but is it true that dairy is as bad for you as they say?
Back to it depends. It depends.
Okay.
So
Right.
2/3 of people actually have a lactose intolerant. And if you're black, 77% of y'all have a lactose intolerance. So
Well, besides the lactose intolerant, let's say you can handle anything that you put that goes through your body. Is it good for you or is it bad for you?
the thing I want to say is it is really important just to note the lactose intolerance because so many people
Right.
push
Right.
through. But from a bad or good standpoint, full fat grass fed dairy can be great for you. It can be
Okay.
great for your system. But like, listen to the caveats. Full fat grass fed dairy can be great for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the other stuff that's not great for a few reasons. One, where your dairy comes from. If your dairy comes from a factory farm cow that's shoved full of antibiotics and eating food that it's not supposed to eat, like corn, what do you think? It just like magically, the cow just magically
Yeah.
moves all the antibiotics and all the stressors like out of its system? No, it does not. It takes it with it and it goes into the food that you're going to eat. So that's the first thing. And the second piece of it is the movement. What we find in the literature over and over, if you really look in the literature, I'm not talking about reading one or two articles. I mean, look at, like, do a literature review, really dig into the science. We find that fat is not the issue. We are not overweight in America because we have a fat issue, except for like trans fat, but that's a whole different conversation. Fat actually is one of the macronutrients that will help you lose the weight the most. That's why ketogenic is so successful, because of the insulin component that I talked about earlier. So low fat skim, it pulled out all of the good things about dairy, and you're left with essentially lactose, which is, like lactose, which most of us are allergic to, and a lot of us in different varieties. So I would say, grass-fed butter, grass-fed ghee are great. Full-fat yogurt, if you can tolerate it, is great. But cheese and milk, they're very specific caveats. And also remember, too, that when it comes to dairy, it can cause inflammation in the system for people who can even tolerate it. And so really you want to only be eating it, no more than 2 times a week if you can handle all of it. But it needs to be highest quality.
Bread. Like, I've heard my whole life, and I've also looked at people who are like, yeah, that's true. Wheat bread, even though it's categorized and marketed as healthier, it's still the same as regular bread, correct?
Correct.
So it doesn't. So that urban legend is kind of, sure, you don't have to, if you're going to eat something with bread, might as well eat something that's going to be good because they're all just the same.
Yeah, wheat in America is just shit. It's just grown differently. It might as well be white flour. And 9 times out of 10, when you turn around and read the ingredients, it has a whole bunch of white flour in it. It's just it has just enough wheat in it to be marketed as such. If you're losing weight, bread is not your friend. But if you are going to eat bread,
Sure.
I always recommend ancient grains. But again, you got to read the label because it's so easy to put whatever the hell you want on the label, whatever you want on the package. You really want to look at the back and say, all right, is there really oats? Is there really amaranth? Is there really these ancient grains? So I don't eat gluten, but the ones that I recommend to all of my one-on-one clients is David's Killer Bread, because you can get it at Costco and you can get it at pretty much any grocery store. Low sugar, high quality, but when you look at the back of that label and then you put it against the label of like a whole wheat bread, you're going to see the night and day difference.
Right. So last urban legend here, and that is, you go to a fast food restaurant, you're like, okay, I'm going to start eating healthy. You say, kill the bread, make it a lettuce wrap. Is it kind of the same thing because they cook with the same grease, they cook with everything else? So what is the difference in a lettuce wrap and a bread, besides the bread and wheat and vegetable?
When we think about fast food, we got to really think about the quality of the food that you're eating. So if you're going to a McDonald's or an Arby's or a Chick-fil-A, and for the record, I went to all of those places, your quality of food is lacking. And so that, as in that hamburger isn't real meat, right? It's like,
right, yep.
Okay, you know what I mean.
Obviously.
That chicken's not like all real chicken. And so that's why it's not as great. Like, eating a lettuce wrapped burger is going to be better for you than eating a bun from a fast food restaurant, because not only does that bun not great for you, but they tend to put on vegetable oils instead of like the grass-fed butter. Right. Coconut oils are the healthiest oils. So that is the lesser of the two evils. But when you really look at what you're eating, I firmly believe the quality of your food matters way more than the quantity of it.
Mm-hmm.
So going back to what I said in the beginning, if you focus on real food, you eat things that taste good or from nature, by default, you're just going to be in a better space, and you don't have to do all the math that comes with it.
Well, you bring up some interesting topics because it's kind of like you want to eat healthy, but because I can look at it the same way as people would. You want to eat healthy, but there are just so many things that you don't understand about eating healthy. And I think that's the most important part of at least listening to someone that does know what's happening, defer the person that lost 25 pounds last week in your thing just from starving themselves.
That I just love that you said that, because when I think about who I want to follow, and this is in business, health, otherwise, I want to live their life, right? So when I was getting healthy, I wanted to have freedom in my body. I wanted to be able to just eat. I mean, I just wanted to eat food. I didn't want to have to
Sure.
count and calculate and do all those things. And so I looked for gurus and experts that helped me have a free life, have space, have time, not have
Sure.
to plan everything, not have to do that. And I think that that's such an important piece. So like if your friend who lost 25 pounds is giving you advice, but they starved themselves, drank cayenne and lemon and water and hated
Yeah.
you know what I mean? And like couldn't sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
is that it? Is that what you want? And I think the other piece of it, for what it's worth, is we all want a quick fix. And I just invite your listeners to think about the fact that a quick fix is a year. Like a quick fix is 2 years. If you have been struggling with your weight for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 1 year is a drop in the bucket. We've
Mm-hmm.
just been so accustomed to wanting it immediate, but it's like you've mistreated your body for this long. It just needs a little love, like a relationship. Like you're not gonna get it the first date, and if you do, like you're probably not gonna stay with them, right? Like you gotta warm it
Mm-hmm.
up. You gotta like love it a little bit, and then it'll give you what you want. But we don't do, like we're not accustomed to doing that, and I think part of it's because people don't talk so openly about the fact that like it takes a year or two to get to your optimal health on your own.
Yeah. So I want to dive kind of underneath all the health realm and go because you do a podcast and it's called The Lies We've Been Fed. Now, I did listen to a couple episodes, but I have a question for you. Now, out of producing this podcast, do you throw out and you like because for some reason I have heard the entrance theme and how you guys, you come on, I'm yada yada yada, we do this. I have heard that somewhere. Have you like ever put it out there as an ad on different podcasts or some sorts?
No, we've not.
No. I don't know where I've heard it then. I don't know where I've heard it at. But tell me because you did have a podcast called The
The
Full
full.
Plate.
Hmm.
The Full Plate, and then you went over to The Lies We've Been Told or Been Fed. So what made you go from actually what made you start doing a podcast?
I think podcasting is fun. You get to meet really interesting people like yourself, right? You get to bring these different
Yeah.
guests on. You
Right.
get to chat with them. For the full plate, the reason I shifted over to doing the lives we've been fed is when it comes to health, it's really nuanced. Like I'm trying to explain these concepts, right, that can feel a little
Mm-hmm.
bit over your head. And literally, if anyone's like, all of this is too much, just eat real food. Like walk away from this podcast and just increase the amount of real food you're eating. But it's nuanced. It's complicated because not only is there mixed messages for food, you have mixed messages in your body. Like you have all
Mm-hmm.
these thoughts and feelings and stories that were passed down from your grandparents and your community, and so um, wanted to give people a framework of how to get healthy without having without all the fluff. We just really wanted to give people a real clear idea of why they think that way and then what they can do. And I think you need space and time for health, and we wanted to also walk with them during it so that they could have
Mm-hmm.
guides, support, and know who to reach out to.
What have you found that is the hardest doing a podcast?
when I was doing the full plate, it was finding guests, like not hard to find guests because everyone wants to be on your podcast, right? It was more so finding for me, because I talked a lot about health, is shifting through who I truly believed and who I didn't. Because look, there's so much shit about health out there, like just wrong stuff, and people adamantly believing in their wrong stuff. And so the amount of time it took to shift through was exhausting, which is why I stopped doing that type of podcast and instead shifted to not an interview style, but a two-person podcast where we just dug like a serial type of thing.
No, I feel you on the guest part, because it's kind of like, here we're kind of an independent podcast. We don't have the best audience, but we have an audience, and it's kind of like, and when I first started this, and I'm not trying to take the highlight off of you to me, but just to give you a little insight, when I started, it was just basically independent musical artists that never got out there. Like, that they haven't made it yet, they can't do it. So my point was to try to break them out. But then you realize, okay, well, we have to kind of move away from that a little bit, because this so little audience is watching. And so once you would build up and you would get bigger guests, you would get bigger, different topics, you would realize, okay, now you can put the independent artist in here because it's mixed in between this big artist or this topic. And the hardest thing, and also the hardest thing, is kind of being repetitive, like, because there's some days you just don't want to do it. And you're just like, well, I have to. Sure, I work you work like a 60-hour job week, but you're also working like a 60-hour week doing a podcast. So it's like you're always working, never stopping.
Yeah. I think the thing that's so interesting, though, is that people really are multifaceted. And that's why it's like independent artists here, big artists here at this podcast, because your listeners, when you said they're not the best, I think what you meant was you don't have the biggest audience, but like they're like probably really dope people who are like have so many layers and so many interests. And I think that that's what's really cool about podcasts is like you can do that. But to your point, it's like you go work a 30, 40, 50, 60-hour work week, and then you add this on top of it, and to shift through guests and preparing questions and intros. And if you edit, oh Jesus, which you probably do because you have a studio, editing is a beast. I don't know how
honestly, I don't write questions and I don't edit. I want it because when I started this, I wanted it to be as real as possible. If I couldn't think of a question, I just couldn't think of a question. That's how I wanted it, because you just see so many fake people out there that are like, for example, a lot of people don't know when I start recording. And that's the beauty of it, because if they're a jerk to me when we start and you're just going to turn that charm on as soon as I say, okay, we're recording, I don't want it to be that way, but I've learned through doing it, sometimes you have to do that because people will then get off their high horse. That's probably like a jerk to me, but just how I found works.
I mean, I think everyone does things their way. I think that's the most interesting piece. And like, I mean, to tie it to health, like podcast and health and business, is like, you got to do it your way. What works for you, how you find your people, how like you connect with folks. Like, there's no right way to do it. Like, there's so many paths. And yeah, I mean, I feel you. I feel you on like how you want to record, how you want to do it, who you want to talk to. Like, it's got to be your way. It's your podcast. And if it's not enjoyable, and it becomes this like task that you don't even want to do, which is why I stopped doing the full plate.
All right. So I want to know the other side of Erica Ballard here. So I'm just going to give some one-off questions, and you just give me some answers, kind of like a quick Q&A real quick here, because I want to get away from the health side, because we all know you're a health specialist. You know a lot about health, but a lot of people probably don't know from the interviews that you've done that I've read that you probably have a more interesting, not saying that health's not interesting, but you probably have more interest of you that no one is very highlighting here. So one would be, what's the last book you read?
The Beautiful No.
Okay, what is that? Is it like a
It is a book
Romance?
by, it's a book by Sherry Salata, who used to be Oprah's CEO, like head producer. And it,
Okay.
yeah, and it's about, it was really good about like just getting your life back and how sometimes the world says no to you because the world like the universe, God, spirit, whatever you believe in, has a yes for you. So like, don't like, yeah, drink some wine and like feel bad, but then remember that, remember that there's like this bigger thing happening for you. Yeah, I just finished that last week. It was really good.
What do you think? And this is not part of this thing, but what do you think about the Ellen DeGeneres situation? Have you been keeping up with that?
I
Because you mentioned
haven't.
Oprah. I was like,
Yeah, no, I haven't. I read something about it on Instagram, but like, I mean, who knows?
geez,
What?
Ellen, what do you expect? Like, and I don't mean that in that way, but I would expect all of those people just to be jerks, just because they can be. They don't have to be the nicest people.
Yeah, but I think that there are some really good people out there. My brother works out
Yeah,
in LA, and there's some like pretty quality human beings. Like Zac Efron's down to earth. Like he's supposed to be like
yeah.
actually really super dope. So I don't know. I don't really. I used to love Us Weekly and like People and and Bravo, and now I'm like, I don't fucking know those people. So like,
Mhm.
I don't watch them. I don't know them. So I don't have a comment on it.
Okay. What is the last thing that you watched on Netflix or any streaming service, whether it be a show or a movie or?
Schitt's Creek, like
Okay, I haven't watched it. Is it worth watching? Because I'm a
I
fan of Eugene Levy because of the American Pies, but
I loved it. I
okay.
was like rolling. My husband stopped at like season 4. I tell you what, I couldn't wait to get to 6. I was so mad when it ended. It was I loved it. Yeah, so Schitt's Creek, it was bomb.
How many seasons? Isn't it like 20 seasons of that?
6.
6, but that's a lot to go back and just be okay. I'm gonna start it, and you got like 24 episodes a season times 6, and they're like hour a piece. And you're just like, is it worth really going back and watching? Honestly, does it hold up?
Oh yeah. I I think there's only like 13 episodes a season, and they're all like only 22
Okay.
minutes.
Oh, okay. So not too bad.
Yeah, totally worth it. Downloaded a second app to get to the 6th season. I thought it was hilarious.
um, what are your thoughts on the the Tiger King situation? Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, I wasted my time watching that.
Why? I thought it was actually pretty cool. Well, I don't think it would last for generations just because it wasn't that eye-opening, but I do find it was very entertaining, to say the least. A gay man that supposedly put a hit out on this lady, you know.
It was entertaining till
Yeah,
like episode 5, and then I was like, I know what's like you kind of know what's happening. I just, for me, it felt kind of sad, like, because it was a story
yeah,
about a man that was losing his mind. Real at the heart of it was like a man who was losing his mind, and I think we like laughed at like the eyeshadow and the music videos, but I'm like, he was going crazy, and no one knew how to help
yeah.
him, and that to me like was like, oh, no one, no one, and then Doc is a nut job. So like that,
Yeah.
like totally misogynistic piece of shit. Like definitely manipulating women. So I just kept being like, oh my god, why do these people like these people need help? The coach in me was just devastated. So I didn't love it because of that. I just thought the premise really was like a man losing his mind. Because when you really look back into like him at the beginning, he was a sweet man, and then he just
Mm.
lost it.
You think Carol Baskin killed her husband? Or do you think legitimately something fishy happened without her knowing? Because because if you look at it, you can look at it from both sides, but then it's like, okay, well, why when it was time for her, to deem him dead that day, that hour, she wouldn't,
Stuff like that, I never know. Like, I, it's like asking if like a non killed that woman from Serial. I'm like, I don't know. Like, I don't know. So I feel like I would need a little bit more time with the evidence to make a decision. But I feel like they didn't highlight it enough for me to know enough. But that was some crazy shit, to your point.
What show from like the 90s or 80s do you think holds up now? Like you can go, okay, you got kids, you be like, okay, you need to go watch this show because it's excellent.
The 80s or 90s?
For me, because you could say Friends, but I don't really think Friends holds up as much as the other ones. Like, I would say Friends is one of my favorites of all time, but I would say Fresh Prince holds up more than Friends just because it has that teenage vibe. The Friends is kind of the 25-ish to 30-ish realm, they're trying to figure out live. Maybe Full House.
I was going to
Maybe.
say Doug.
Duh. And Patty Mayonnaise.
And the Beats. I'm gonna go with Doug. That's my final answer.
Okay. Duh. Now, did you see where they were bringing back Rugrats? Speaking of Doug, because that was kind of in the Nickelodeon realm.
Correct.
You saw they were bringing back Rugrats, and then people are complaining because of how the characters look. And I'm like, but they wouldn't look like this in the 90s anyways. They didn't have the technology. So, I mean, you can complain, but is it really going to bother you tomorrow?
I didn't think they're bringing it back, but, like, they drew it. I feel like I would like
Right.
Angelica. Yeah. I would like Angelica 3D. Like, I would be here for, like, Tommy Pickles, like, probably looking a little better than he did. So, and I would love if Mace did another song for it. So I'm here for this new Rugrats.
What is your favorite album of all time? Are you an album person or are you like a song person before I ask that?
I'm probably a song person. Yes.
Okay, give me your top 3 favorite songs.
You Can Call Me Al is definitely one, or not, like one of the top 3. I'm like, what would be the other? I feel like it's all like timely, like how you're feeling in that moment. So really, but I do love You Can Call Me Al. I could listen to that any moment. I have good memories with it.
Who is that?
What?
Who is that? You Can Call Me Al.
Paul Simon.
Okay. Okay. Not the big Paul Simon fan, so I wouldn't have known.
Okay. Yeah. No, Paul Simon. Right now, and this is blasphemy, but I don't care. I'm really feeling Justin Bieber's Intention, so that's what I'm going to say for a second right now. And then I keep going back to Motown, like Boardwalk. Like, do you know that song? Like, is it the Four Platters where it's like Under the Boardwalk?
Boardwalk.
Yeah. I could listen to those 3 on repeat today, so I'm gonna choose them.
We're done with those, but what is one question that you're going in for an interview and they're going to ask?
Like a job interview or a podcast interview?
I guess either or. Like, kind of like, okay, they're going to go, okay, Erica, obviously they're going to ask about how you started the company and stuff like that, but like, if you're meeting with a client or you're doing a podcast, what is one question you're always going to get, no matter who it is?
What should they do to drop weight?
Okay, the answer to that?
Eat real food.
Obviously, okay. Now, what is one question you never get or a topic that you never get to talk about that you wished you'd be able to talk about?
I think I would like to talk a lot more about the mindset around food. I'm starting to get a conversation, but like the subconscious work, I think is really interesting stuff.
Explain, elaborate.
So most people ask me like, what do you eat to get healthy? And the issue is never what do you eat, it's how do you do what you're supposed to do. So helping people understand the blockages that they have around food, the stories they tell themselves, like the beliefs that they carry down with them from their family and communities, I think is really, I don't talk as much about. And I would even take it one step further and say like the having conversations about how like food is frequency, and it's essentially like what you put in your body is the energy in which you show up as. So talking more about that for me, I think I will be soon, but I don't talk as much about it because people are like, how do I lose weight? And I'm like, you got to focus on your mind. That's what you really got to do. But I can give you the tactics in the meantime.
What's the most, and I guess this maybe not be an answerable question, but what's the most about the mind that you have to get in concept in order to lose weight? Because obviously when you think of losing weight, exercise is probably the last thing you need to worry about. It's sleep, getting your mind on time, eating the right food, and then exercise.
Yeah, I think you can go in either of those. I think exercise is the least, but I do think movement's important, and I think you can go in
Right.
any way you want to. But from the mind component of it, it's really we all have stories attached to food. So when you can't do what you say you want to do, there's a reason it's serving you. Like being unhealthy is serving you for some reason, and it's your job to figure it out. And so I always tell people, like, ask yourself, how is being unhealthy serving you? Figure that answer out, and then you can figure out the work that you actually have to do moving forward. Because, like, I had a client who said, I never have time. I don't have time. But she's an entrepreneur and can plan her own schedule. And what we realized is that her mom never took time to take care of herself. And so she equated free time to laziness. So anytime she made time to take care of her, she felt lazy, right? And it's like these stories that like I'd love to start to break down more, for people to understand that like 9 times out of 10, it's not that you don't know what to do. 9 times out of 10, it's that like you don't think you're worthy of it, or it's attached to some story you have about your story about your food or time or whatever it would be.
Do people ever come to you and they're like, look, I'm stressing so bad, and my habit, I stress eat? And if they do, what is your common answer to debate that? Obviously, you got to find something else besides that to get the stress off. But what is usually your answer when they ask that or tell you that?
Yeah, I mean, the first is, well, you better deal with your stress. And then the second is, the more you eat sugar, the more you want sugar. So if you can set guidelines for yourself where it's like, I don't eat carbs until 3, you're probably not, you're going to be able to hold off wanting that craving. So you can teach your body how not to want it. So I have a lot of clients like not eat sugar until 3, so that their body doesn't naturally crave it. But the thing about that question and what makes it so hard is that you're trying to fight biology. So your body is biologically designed to want sugar in times of stress. So it is really hard to fight that urge because biology almost always wins. Like willpower is finite. So yeah, there's that tactic, but at the end of it, like it has to be you getting your stress down. Like, and the other way to do it outside of like not having carbs till 3 is just taking deep breaths throughout the day, in through the nose, out through the mouth, in through the nose, out through the mouth, like 4-count breaths. It'll help move your body out of the fight or flight state you're in to the parasympathetic nervous state, which will allow you to gain more control in your brain and in your body.
What do you think about people, and I want to know if this is healthy or which is people that will go, okay, I'll go one day without eating, and then the next day I'll eat only 2 meals a day, and then the next day I'll go without eating, and then et cetera, et cetera. Is that healthy and somewhat to the body, or is it actually destroying it?
So you're talking about intermittent fasting?
Right.
Again, it depends. Like,
okay, really. So really, the health vibe is all what your body can withstand.
Yeah.
In the whole jumble of traffic.
Yeah, and what your goals are. So that type of pressure is really great for your body, but you can't do it forever. It's too much oftentimes. a guy like my colleague, my podcast partner, he used to do 5-day fast every quarter, and he realized like it's probably because there's a lot of science that shows that it's really great for you to do that. But he's starting to find like maybe that's not the best thing for him. Maybe it's a couple times a year versus every quarter. And he was fasting really long and doing 24-hour day fasts, and he was losing way more weight than he needed, and that stress was a little too much for his body. So if you're trying to lose weight or burn fat, fasting is one of the best tools for you. But once you get there, like, what do you need? Because really, fasting 1 or 2 days a week is great, but fasting for like 3 or 4 days at a time when you're already at the health level you want to be at, is it the best for you? I don't know. It depends on like what other stressors are happening in your life, because not eating is a stressor. If you're super calm, super chill, running at like a 3 on a 10-point scale, doing that a couple times a week is going to be great. But if you're like at an 8 or a 9 on a 10-point scale, that stress is just going to compound and you're not going to get the results you want.
So a couple more things here as we're running short on time. Explain what the B method is.
So the B method is essentially the way that I help clients get healthy. So like everyone has a process, and for me, I have a 4-step method, and that's what that is. And so what it is it's first figuring out your unique body blueprint. So like what the hell is actually going on in your body? What are your actual goals? What do you really want to achieve? Then from there, it's removing inflammation triggers so we can get you listening to your body. And then next step is gut health, because as I talked about in the beginning, like your brain and gut are connected. It really, really matters, getting that right. And then from there, scaling for energy. So like, what do you need to do so you can get out of your head and into your body so you can make the best decisions for you, and recognize that sometimes a cookie and wine is the best decision. And like, how do you eat that? And then, you know, the next day wake up and have eggs with kale.
Yeah. Give me a situation or a story that you've came upon and like that person was the toughest to work with because of this, and how did you overcome that and actually open up that person?
Sure. Oh, that's a good question.
I don't know if that makes sense, but
it does. So I think that the hardest people to come in and work with are people who are like, I'm going to lose weight only by focusing on food and working out. But they've struggled their whole life. So they just want, like, give me a diet, give me a plan, give me this. It's all I need. And I'm like, well, if that's all you needed, you would have done it already. And so that goes back to like the emotional side of food. And so the hardest people for me, and I've started to cut them truly for my one-on-one clients, is if you come in and all you want's a plan, like I'm not your girl. I'm here for a holistic lifestyle. And so the way that I've been able to open them up is by, in addition to the food, giving them smaller exercises to think about, to do, to journal, to really dig in and give them the space that they need to see what their actual issue is instead of trying to force it. Like, hey, journal on this. Hey, will you take like 3 minutes and just breathe when you drink coffee? And just making that white space available to them so that they can actually create that white space and that awareness of why they're failing at their health.
I can only imagine how you say the mind is basically the main part of losing weight and getting healthy. So you're kind of a therapist in a way, like a soothing therapist in a way for some people, I would imagine.
Yeah, I'm a non-licensed food therapist is what I am.
So let's take these for example. I know you said counting calories is not the way to go, but let's just say people are counting calories. How do you know how much calories you're intaking or how little you're intaking? How do you measure it? Okay, I need to do 2,000 calories or I need to do 1,500. How do you know roundabout what's too much or what's too little and what's exactly what you need?
Well, when you eat real food, your body will tell you. So that's why, like, I find that question from a standpoint of is difficult. But if you want to count your calories, I mean, an app is the best way to do it. And you don't ever want to have 1,500 calories. Most people need 2,000 calories minimum a day. Period. End sentence. That's what they need. So that's where you want to start. moving towards, and I would just get an app and track it if that's what is important to you and what will move you forward. But if you eat real food, I mean, it's like if you eat real food, you don't need to do it. I mean, you can't eat, like you can eat a bag of potato chips, but you can't eat 3 bananas. It's impossible because when you eat real food, your body will stop you, right? Like the idea of 3 bananas is so
Right.
gross. So,
But I also look at it this way, as if, like, when you say, like, when I mentioned stress eating or overeating for some people, it's like I look at it this way. I overate, but did I overeat a bag of chips or a thing of cookies, or did I overeat some grapes or some yogurt? And that's kind of how I kind of focused. It was like, I ate one more yogurt than I was supposed to, but is it really going to hurt me in the long run because I wasn't eating, the unhealthy stuff?
I think the way that you're looking at it is right.
Okay.
Most of us, like, there's, what do I want to say here is I think that the way that you're looking at it is right. And I say that because when what you're doing right now is you're trying to choose the lesser of the 2 evils, and you're trying to eat something that's better for you. And that's a step in the right direction. And that should be applauded. And that's what I think. I think that if your go-to used to be a bag of chips and you're overeating yogurt, you're in a really good space. But what you need to do then is to get to a place where you can actually hear your hunger cues and what you need and don't need. And that just takes time, and that takes self-awareness. And that's why, like you mentioned, it's a mindset game, really, at the root of it, because you've got to get back into your body and you've got to understand when is too much for it. And it starts with self-awareness.
Now, like I'm doing the DDP yoga, which is the wrestler Diamond Dallas Page. He has his own yoga thing, and he has this meal plan that comes with the yoga. And I realized that none of those meal plans work for me, just because from where I'm at, I can't. For one, a lot of the food is not accessible here. It's all in like California or et cetera, et cetera. But what I did was I wrote down some of like the good carbs. I didn't realize there were good carbs and bad carbs. I thought carbs were just carbs. And I didn't realize there were good sugars and bad sugars. I thought there was just sugar, and you had to cut that out. But it mentioned in there that you don't need to eat fruit past lunchtime. Now, is that true? And if so, why?
I hate this question, and I'm going to tell you why. Is the banana is not why you're fat. Like, right? Like the banana, like the apple's not why, like, we have an issue.
Yeah.
So that's why, one, I hate that question. I'm like, y'all, if you're eating cookies and you move to an apple, good fucking job. You know what I mean? Like, that's great.
Yeah.
And then from a carb standpoint, there's debate, right, of like whether you should have it earlier in the day or later, because that's what they're saying. Fruit's a carb, and you should have it earlier in the day. I believe you should have fruit later in the day. That's my belief based on the science that I read. And I say that because the moment you start to eat a carb, the moment you start to eat sugar, you want more of it. You're biologically designed to want more sugar when you start to eat it, because that's what carbs are processed in your body. And you also want to go to bed when you eat carbs. When do you want to go to bed? At nighttime. So eating fruit later in the day is what I always recommend for clients, because, well, if their goal is to drop weight, and we've already gone through the conversation about the banana not being your issue, because the later you eat sugar in the day, the less you want sugar throughout the day. And when you eat sugar and when you eat carbs, it makes you tired, which means you can go to bed. And that's what you want to do at night. It's not what you want to do during the morning. And there's a whole conversation about like the blood sugar roller coaster, but it takes a while to explain.
Well, let me ask you this, because I was always told my whole life, and I know someone that will eat dinner and then go to bed. And I was told that was bad for you because that made you gain weight. So is that true? That's not true?
You want to have 2 to 3 hours between your last meal and dinner. Your last meal and sleep. That's it.
Okay. So if you're eating if you're eating dinner at 5 o'clock and then you go to bed at 10 or 11, you're good. You should be good.
Yeah, or 7, and you go to bed at that time. What I think you're talking about is the pyramid. Like you don't want it to be like a pyramid. Smallest meal is breakfast, medium meal is lunch, biggest meal is dinner. What you really want is all 3 of those meals to be the exact same size. You want to move away from the 5, 6 meals and do 3 of those pretty much the same size, or you want to do the opposite, or you want to do an inverted pyramid: breakfast biggest, lunch middle, dinner smaller. one of those two ways will work, but it's that big meal late at night, right before you go to bed. That's the kicker. But so that's probably where that comes from. But again, it depends, right? Like it depends on, like there's no debate whether or not doing that is bad for you. It's bad for you, but it depends on how you want to set it up. 3 meals versus inverted versus when, and things of that nature.
Last couple of questions here, and I'll let you go. We got a 10 o'clock cutoff time. So what people going keto, obviously it depends on how your body is, but would you necessarily say, okay, go keto to someone that is trying to lose weight?
I would say, and there's tons of science to back this up, Virta Health is one of my favorites for it, is if you have insulin resistance or are like, so if you're pre-diabetic or diabetic or have insulin resistance, like your glucose numbers or insulin levels are higher than you need to be, keto's fantastic. It's the only modality that has been shown to reverse diabetes. Which is a bold claim.
Now, what about caffeine? People that are addicted to caffeine. Obviously, the sodas and diet sodas are the same thing. There's no difference. But what if you got to have caffeine? Like, could you just have like regular hot tea and that? Have you seen people that just go, I'm so addicted to this caffeine, these drinks, this sweet tea, this whatever, and you just tell them, look, if you move that and you go to regular unsweetened caffeinated tea or wherever, have you seen those be big works doing that? Or how do you counteract people that are addicted to caffeine? I guess that's the better question.
So the way that you mentioned in the beginning about how you take one thing and remove it, you take the other thing and remove it. So for caffeine, you do something similar. I don't think you ever, like, I removed coffee from my diet. I was useless for 3 days until I got out of my system. So you want to, when it comes to caffeine, you basically want to have your last cup of whatever by 2. Start there. So if you're having coffee at 3, 4, 5, like try to get everything up before 2. And then you just start to systematically bring it down. Caffeine's not necessarily bad for you. Coffee's not necessarily bad for you. It's only bad for you if it doesn't sit well in your system. So I do terrible with caffeine. Like, I didn't realize that. I can feel it coming out of my neck, and my eyeballs start to bulge, and I imagine that I'm like what people are on, when people recreationally do Adderall. I've never done that. No judgment if people have, but like I imagine me on caffeine as like being on Adderall, because I'm like, ugh! Like if my mind isn't focused on something, like it's racing. But I have clients and friends who can drink, a cup or 2 and it never affects them. They pull it out, doesn't affect them. So you're like, with caffeine, I would say just have your last cup by 2, and if you have the time to do it, pull it for 2 weeks and then add it back in and see how badly it affects you. If it sucks, pull it. If it doesn't, keep it.
Now, this question is for me. I usually base my questions, like I said, I don't pre-write them, but I'm thinking of how probably the normal average American is thinking. And I've looked this question up time and time again. It gives me different answers. So I'm going to come to you for this. How much water should you drink per day? Because some people will say, okay, you need this many, this many, this many.
This is why health is so, it depends. I think the minimum you need is I think the minimum you need is 2 liters, but after that, it's your body. Like, if you're more active, if you live in a hotter state like Mississippi, like, you know what I mean? Like, it all depends on where you're at, what you need, how stagnant your bowels are. So I tell people I recommend a minimum of 2 liters of water, and then play around. You'll know. And if you can't if you can't quench your thirst at like 100 ounces, it's something else. Like, you should not need 100 ounces unless you're like hiking to be hydrated.
Well, I think we have come to the end of our time here on the podcast. So this has been the Depends on Your Body podcast. There we go. But I like that question, that answer, because it really, when you dumb it down, it really depends, because someone else's body, like kind of like taste of music. my taste in music isn't your taste in music. Your taste in music isn't mine, etc. It depends on who you are. But you can go listen to Erica's podcast, The Lies We've Been Fed, which is available everywhere podcasts are available. You can follow her on Instagram at Erica Ballard Health. Thank you, Erica. I really hope we treated you well here. I hope the questions weren't too dumb to ask.
No, I love them. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. I really do appreciate it.